Hey everyone, Maurice from Erickson Design and Woodworking, and today we're going to build this really cool keepsake box. It's going to be a continuous grain that has a waterfall effect from the top of the box all the way to the bottom of it. And I can tell you the results were super awesome, and but there were some challenges, and we're going to walk through that together. Now I picked this wood up. It's quilted maple. This is highly figured, and the grade on this is really high. And luckily, Austin was kind enough to sell it to me. That stuff is a premium, and it's extremely expensive. It's hard to work with, but we're going to walk through this together, and I'll give you some tips and tricks on how to work with it, how to do this just with a table saw and a bandsaw and some other hand tools, and but the results are really great, and there's specific things that we really need to pay attention to. So on the flip side, I wanted to do some marquetry on this, and just to take it to a different level, and not unfortunately, but X-Tool ended up reaching out. They sent me a brand new laser machine to test out, give a honest feedback review of it. So right now I'm putting that together. My other laser machine is kind of in the corner right now, and I just didn't have enough time to work through different tolerances for the marquetry that I really wanted to put on this box. But some quilted casipo, and this stuff is awesome. I probably pronounced the name of it wrong, but it's an African hardwood that it's really dense, and it has a really nice darkest tint to it, and in the veneer form it's really durable. It doesn't break easy. It holds up pretty well over time, and so again, I figured this would probably be a really good contrast that would look really good with the quilted maple figure that I'm going to go with on this. And I'm not going to lie to you, so this is the first time that I'm going to try to do this continuous grain structure around the sides of the box. To take it a step further, I'm going to go ahead and try to do a waterfall effect from the top face of the box all the way down to the sides. And the figure on the quilted maple, I think, is going to be really awesome. And I'm really excited to dig into this one, but there's a lot of risk because this quilted maple is extremely expensive. It's probably the most expensive piece of wood I have in my garage. And usually first time things, I don't pick the most expensive thing to experiment with. So this process that I'm going to go through, I used a whole laundry list of different tools, and I made sure I linked everything in the video description. So if you want to see an item, how much it is, the direct links are right to Amazon. And I also put in Austin over at DeadWood Sawmill, his Facebook site. If you have time, check him out. He has phenomenal wood, and luckily, I don't know how I came across his content, but I am so glad, because this is probably the best figured wood that I've ever had a chance to work with. And so right now what I'm doing is I'm just squaring everything up, and there's a couple things to do this waterfall, and I have to make sure my width, both long, depth, and lengthwise, are exactly my box dimensions, and everything has to be in one piece. So I can only cut, to get the continuous grain, only cut one cut, and that's it. If you have to do a recut, you missed a dimension, you pretty much are your box, the dimensions are gonna change, and you're gonna have to redo it. So everything needs to be square. When you put it in the bandsaw, it needs to be directly in the middle. And then when you put it in the drum sander, you're only taking the material to sand away those saw cuts for the book match. If you need to remove more material, flip the boards, bottom side up, and remove that material, just not the facing of the actual box itself. All those little small depths will change that grain structure over time, and if you remove too much material, those lines just won't match up. So we'll walk through exactly how to do the continuous grain structure. So I like to label everything. So when I flip that board around, I'm going to label what my long side is, what my short side is for each board. And so L1 is my long side, side 2 is S2, and then it will flow around to my long side 3 into my side short 4. And if you get it annotated correctly and how you label it and it's facing upwards, it takes all that guesswork out, and makes a life just a little bit easier, because you can get lost on what grain needs to go where. So the more labels that you have on it, the easier your life will be, and it'll prevent those small mistakes. And what I ended up doing is the height of that board is about 1 1/8 longer than the overall height of my box. And that inch, I'm going to go ahead and I'll do a 90-degree cut. And so where it flows on the top of that box, so the grain structure will flow on top. But again, you have to label all of that. And here pretty soon you'll see exactly how I accounted for that. Now, because I left that 1/8 of an inch for my overall box length, it accounts for that. So I know exactly what my dimensions of that box is going to be. And that's critical when I start working on the lid, and how that's going to line up when I start gluing all of that together. Now you can see that I made sure the bottom of the box was against my fence. And what I'm removing there is going to be the top of my box that will be mitered to that quilted casipo. And those are critical cuts, and you only have one shot at it. But as long as you make all the cuts exactly the same, where what I mean that is you don't move your fence, and so everything is exactly the same width of your previous cuts. So everything should line up quite nicely. And if you do all of this correctly and your math is correct, that grain structure will flow in between each one of those 4 boards. Now I decided not to use my precision jig, and I'm going to use my Jessam miter gauge. I love this thing. I have a link in the description for this one. It is phenomenal, and super easy to use, and I can put any attachment that I want onto it. And it makes life extremely easy, and I can get pretty accurate results just by putting a sacrificial board for my miter cuts. So now, I don't know if this was a critical mistake or not. I ended up switching out that blade because I wanted a really small kerf, and there was too many teeth on this. So what ended up happening is I had a lot of burn. That quilted maple, it burns so easy, and the amount of teeth just did not work well for me. But I pushed through it. I'm prepping the miter cuts for the top of the box now. And again, those were the cuts from the top, and it ended up being around 1 inch. And so just quick miter cuts, and I was right into it. So the big thing is I didn't want to remove any of the material of the overall length from the top of that miter. And so just making sure that everything really lined up correctly. I did a lot of test cuts, and just to make sure I didn't remove any excess material to cause any gaps within these miters. I wanted them as tight as I could get them. And what that ended up doing, it paid dividends in the end, where the amount of sanding and cleanup it was so much easier, and everything really stayed square. And I checked square a lot. But I really wanted to highlight on how I kind of configure all of these cuts to do the rabbets into the shoulders, and how to do those tolerances correctly to not have really big gaps within the actual shoulder itself, but how to dial that in as fast as possible. And I love my calipers, but then I'll transition into a gauge where I can do depth of cut really easily. So I picked up this eye gauge, and this thing is phenomenal. I have a link in the description for this one too, and this saves me a ton of time. And it's almost a sanity check just to make sure that I don't remove a lot of material, or it's wrong, or something happens. This really prevents that. And when you start configuring the router table, or different depths for your table saw, it's just a phenomenal tool that makes your life extremely easy. So talking about making your life a little bit easier, I hate glue ups and I hate clamping. I ended up picking these Bessie four-cornered miter clamps up. These things are freaking amazing. I thought they were a gimmick, or they were gonna be twisted and they were just gonna be terrible to work with. Absolutely not. These things did exactly what I wanted them to do, and I was able to get really tight miter clamps and pressure, even pressure, all the way on all four corners. And what that did is it made everything extremely square and extremely tight. And I had very minimal gaps on each one of these corners. And I am a believer. I'm probably going to pick up a couple more. I have a link in the description for these two, and highly, highly recommend them. Now I'm kind of a judgment point here. I'm gonna do a 45-degree cut long ways, and sometimes these cuts can go a little bit south. I did a little bit of prep, had some coffee, really thought through how I was gonna put my fence up, and how I was gonna control this cut, because any kind of small deviation on these cuts it was gonna be a disaster. But everything worked out really well. The Jessam handles really helped. Really nice to have that on your fence as a kind of a third arm. And just doing some test fitting, and I realized that the panel is too short. And so when I was doing the panels, I just automatically assumed in my head that these were all the same length from the top and the bottom, but I forgot that I added an inch. And so while that's re-gluing, and I went ahead and I have a ton of cleanup stuff I have to do, so there was really no time lost, just a little bit of material. And again, I hate wasting material, but stuff like that does happen. And so finishing the top portion of those 45-degree cuts to get that waterfall effect on that miter cut. And again, everything is lining up extremely nice, and I'm starting to get really excited because I'm kind of over that hump of critical mistake territory. And so now I'm just starting to clean up. If you notice, I do have some pretty severe burn marks on those miter cuts, and I was too scared to address any of that, and I ended up going over that. And you can kind of see it in the final product of some black line-ish. Those are from those burn marks. And what I didn't want to do is lose that edge to try to sand that down, because those burn marks go pretty deep, and it will change the overall depth and how everything lines up. So I just kept it. It's not that noticeable. It's just noticeable to me. Again, those Bessie clamps, I mean, they were a lifesaver on this stuff. And it was so easy to do those miter glue ups that it took all the guesswork out, and it was just automatically square. and it's hard to achieve that with clamps. So I ended up putting this in the video because this is a really nice trick to have. And if you want to control the depth or the length of your spline, you can take just a piece of scrap wood, run it until the height of your blade gives the overall length of each side of the spline that you're going to put in. And so that was just a quick check. I didn't want to do any kind of big mistake, or I wanted it as long as I could get. And this just kind of gave me that warm feeling inside that those were the correct lengths. I ended up putting Zeracot in for the splines, and I love the look of how dark and the kind of the dense grain structure that Zeracot has, but it's extremely painful to work with. You got to wear a mask when you sand on it. It's really terrible stuff, and but it looks phenomenal with the end result. So I skipped a good portion of all the sanding and all the final work on a lot of this stuff. I really wanted to concentrate on that continuous grain structure around the sides and how it flowed from the top to the bottom, or bottom to the top. And right now I'm just kind of going into the final prep work of the box. I'm going to cut it open now just to see exactly how big of a mess that I had inside. Again, earlier, I used tape just to try to alleviate a lot of that glue cleanup that I was going to have to do anyways. And luckily I used that tape, and it wasn't too bad to go through a lot of that cleanup. So we're kind of getting into the home stretch, the final cleanup. I didn't put a lot of this stuff in the video, but there was a lot of cleanup, and I just took my time. And off camera, I ended up making the inside portion of the actual box to where the friction sides will come up, and still use the same material, same concept. But the test fit was absolutely spot on for the cribbage board. And I think at the end, this is going to be a really special keepsake box for this specific board. And it's probably not going to go anywhere. It's going to probably stay at the house. So some quick final sanding. I ended up going from 120 to 220 to 320. And again, I always use Rubio. It is just a phenomenal finish that I love to use, and it just really pops the grain. And when it does dry into that hard wax and you start buffing it, I mean, you can just, if it looks like you're just staring directly, there's so much depth, and I really enjoy this wax. So we're getting down to the end of the video here. Again, everything really did turn out pretty well. And if you made it to the end of the video, hey, I really appreciate all the subscribers. If you're new to the channel, please like, subscribe, turn your notifications on. I have a lot of content that's going to be coming up, and I have a whole laundry list of things I'm going to do with this new laser, and I'm going to test this thing out to the max. And but with this project, the continuous grain and the waterfall, this was just a great exercise of just taking your time, trying to do everything correctly. And I think the end result kind of speaks for itself, and it's just a phenomenal keepsake box with just some amazing wood. And with that, I'll leave you guys with that, and I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.